Right. Okay. So welcome everybody. So we're going to unpack this idea again. We've talked about this briefly, but there's now quite a firmed up proposal coming from the diocese where we're going to pilot something beginning of February. So we wanted to go through this. They were all really clear. What do we mean around commissioned lay missioners in the mix of other forms of missioner, right? The first thing to say, excuse me for my slightly cheeky image, but basically what the diocese is trying to unlearn from Christendom is the idea that you parachute in an ordained priest as the solution to all the woes and problems of a particular parish, right? So the idea that you just have an ordained people that apparently does everything, including all the mission, is not possible anymore, and that we now need to think about teams, yeah, that it needs a team approach with new forms of vocation, right? So I think what we're increasingly feeling, yes, ordained leadership is incredibly important, but as we've discussed in the mixed ecology thing, it is absolutely not possible for an ordained priest to do everything in a parish, no matter how much they try, right? So that we need to have this much more team approach to involvement. So as far as I understand it at the moment, Niagara is the only diocese in Canada that's looking around this lay commissioned missioners level, right? So you have got other licensed lay missioners, other licensed lay people, and you have ordained missioners, but this is the first time I think in Canada where you've got this entry level for someone who's got some time to volunteer, because it's a voluntary post, right? It's a bit like a reader or something like that, where people don't get paid. And there's a caveat to that in a minute, but they're largely people that have some time, either because they're retired and they want to do something with have a sense of vocation. I'll say a bit more what it's about. Or there may be someone who, they want to downsize their working situation and want to do something that matters to them, knowing that it's unpaid. Or they might be someone who's just starting out in life, wants to test some sense of vocation, who might be younger, right? In their like in their 20s or something like that, who really feels a call to being this sort of commissioned lay missioner. So what I want to do is just remind you what we're saying the role of a missioner is, to be really clear, and apologies to those who are missioners who are a part of this group, particularly Garfield. And then I want to say a little bit more, and I want to remind us just again what this vocation is all about. So just to remind you, okay, so missioners are people called by God who are the first to see and creatively respond to the Holy Spirit's initiatives with those outside the church, gathering others around them as they seek to establish new contextual ministries, right? And because of Anglican mission, it isn't just around doing good works. It's been the received wisdom of Anglicanism that contextual mission leads to new forms of ecclesial community. Just let Barman in. There we are. So we start with contextual mission, in the hope that God will grow some new form of contextual mission. And in mixed ecology, we're talking about that being within a parish or an established mission, which diversifies what it's about by reaching out to a very different group of people. What's super important, I think, are that we are talking about three different callings, I think, or vocational levels for what we mean by different forms of missioner. Yeah, so far we've got ordained missioners, which is someone like Rob Miller and Garfield here and Mike Deed. They're all ordained missions where they kind of oversee either a mission which is done by Canon 4.9, or they are overseeing a mission project that we hope is going to become a mission under Canon 4.9, right? Then we have your licensed lay missioners, and they're usually deployed to reach unchurched people miles away from established parish or other churches. And at the moment, we only have one of those, and that's Susie Kim in the diocese. And so the proposal then is for a third level around commissioned lay missioners, right? So they are working voluntarily within a parish or mission context where they are seeking to reach out to the un- and dechurched working under the supervision of either the parish incumbent or by the ordained missioner, or potentially a licensed missioner, overseeing their practice, mentored by me largely in this process. Okay, so it's a whole new thing, and it is about people who are kind of starting out in this whole area to do with mission under supervision. Right, so I just wanted to play a very quick video. Victor's here now, just to remind you, what are we talking about when we talk about missioners? So just to remind you, this is the bigger picture around different levels of missioners. So this is a video of coming from Southwark Diocese, which was where I was working before, where they have commissioned, ordained, licensed lay, and commissioned lay. But just remember, they use the language pioneer rather than missioner, right? Just a slight language difference. But let's just listen to some of these stories. Can you hear it? That's the first thing I want to check.
My name is David, and I'm at Springfield Church in Wallington, pioneering on the Roundshore estate. And the reason I'm so passionate about pioneering is because it gives a framework in order to experiment and try new things and keep adapting. So reaching out into the estate, for me, it's about just coming alongside people first and foremost, and it gives the opportunity to do that, to really see what the people need in order to connect with Christ, not transposing my views on that, but really going low, listening to God, listening to the community, and seeing what beautiful things emerge.
I'm passionate about pioneering because the church needs to change in order the gospel is relevant for a changing culture.
Hey, I'm Chris Henriette, youth pastor at St. Peter's Brockley. And young people are intrinsically pioneering. They stretch and test and ask questions that we never thought to ask. They will question everything about our belief systems, about why we do things, what we do it for. And sometimes adults find that stressful, but it's amazing. It can only grow your faith if you're in that situation. So pioneering is so important, especially with young people.
My name is Jan, and I'm a commissioned lay pioneer working on the Timberley estate in Redhill. For me, pioneer ministry is about finding creative ways of sharing our passion for Jesus with people who wouldn't normally come to church. So it's all about building community, friendship, fun, and laughter. We've recently moved our messy church online, and it's been a great hit, especially Del the Camel and our messy church craft bags, which we've been delivering on the estate.
Hi, I'm Father Hugo, and I am director of St. Matthew's at Elephant and Castle. The encounter with Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. It fills my life with joy, love, purpose, hope. To be a pioneer is, for me, to be able to share this good news with everybody. My mission is particularly with the Latinos in South London. It is a privilege to, among them, proclaim afresh the good news of Jesus Christ. To be a pioneer is an adventure of finding new ways to share the good news of Christ.
Hi, my name is John. I'm an ordained pioneer in a church just south of Blackfriars Bridge in London, seeking to revitalise a struggling parish and engage with the dechurched and unchurched in the area. This is a daunting task on many fronts. I'm passionate about pioneering because I think we need creativity and collaboration in order to effectively listen, to understand and to serve those who live and work in our communities.
Konnichiwa. Hello, my name is Naku, originally from Tokyo, Japan. I have lived in London for 22 years. I am a commissioned lay pioneer for Japanese church. Why am I passionate about pioneering? When I was in Japan, I heard of many gods, but since then, I discovered the one true and trustworthy God, I really love to share my God with the other Japanese people who are living in the UK. So I will go out to find them wherever they are. See you.
My name is Ian Mobsby, and I'm a pioneer, ordained pioneer, just south of Blackfriars Bridge in central London. And I'm passionate about pioneering. I was 10 years a lay pioneer and over 25 years now an ordained pioneer, because I'm really passionate about seeing the faith at work in the world. I really care about reimagining the faith so it can be a resource for people who do not know Christianity or Christ. I think there's a deep sense within my DNA about dreaming about how we can build ecclesial communities out of contextual mission. But I think it's a vocation and a calling, and it's very much who I have been and will continue to be.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick. I am a parish priest in an estate church in a deprived area of Lewisham. I'm passionate about pioneering and fresh expressions because the gospel is for everyone. And we need expressions of church, we need ministries that show everyone that God's love is for them and that they don't have to fit in with a standard mold or a one-size-fits-all mold to come to Jesus. And that we can go out to them with the good news in a way that is accessible and meaningful and transforming to them.
Hi, I'm Patrick Eggleston. I'm Team Rector of Thamesmead in South East London. We have two pioneer projects here. One reaching out to unchurched youth on the Abbeywood estate, and the other a community church in a school in West Thamesmead. Both very different. Both have really taken roots and been successful in their own ways. I'm passionate about pioneering because it enables church to meet people where they are rather than expecting them to come through our doors, which doesn't always work these days. So why not give it a go? Bye for now.
So that gives you a bit of a flavour about this vocation to being missioners. They say pioneers in some parts of the Anglican Communion, but very much the idea of missioners. So we're looking at 3 levels of deployed missioner, right? So there were 2 examples of commissioned lay missioners in what you just heard. And this is what we're saying. So commissioned lay missioners engage with un- and dechurched people seeking to build new ecclesial communities out of contextual mission, cultivating new Christian communities in a local setting. They will normally be based within a parish, working under the supervision of the incumbent or other staff members whilst mentored by the community missioners. So what we're saying here, slightly to broaden that, is that they could work within a mission, either a mission project or a mission under Canon 4.9, or they could be working within a parish context, right? And given that we've got a hell of a lot more parishes than missions, then we're thinking that actually a lot of these might be discerned within missioners. And you heard it said there, and I know I keep banging on about it, but it's super important. So the idea of what they will be working with in partnership with either a mission or a parish is about reaching out to a particular people group or situation, okay? So they will then be looking to listen and then do something in response to that listening, some sort of activity that hopefully will build community of those who are not yet Christian, that will then wait for people to start asking religious questions, to then opening up what formation looks like or becoming Christian looks like for a particular people in a particular context. And then hopefully the then will then grow into being, if it's in a mixed ecology context, a particular congregation, a particular form of ecclesial community within either an existing parish or an existing mission, right? I keep saying, all right, got to stop saying that. I've been talking to too many British people today. Right, and just to be really clear, right, it's important that there is a vocational pathway. So I started off someone who was a very unchurched person. I started off as a volunteer working in what was then an alternative worship community aimed at dechurched people. I grew in vocation to the point where the church started to pay me for 1 day a week to do that while I was working as an occupational therapist. And then it grew and grew and grew. And then I tested for vocation and then got ordained. So can you see there was a pathway to that? I didn't go from 0 to being ordained, that there's actually quite healthy to have this stepped approach for those who might have a calling, particularly engaging with the dechurched and unchurched. So this is a guy, he's an Irish guy on the screen you're looking at, who did exactly that. And in the Diocese of Southwark, started off as a commissioned lay missioner. And because his work was so successful, and he set up a fresh expression in a pub in a parish, which was an interesting combination. And that grew, and I think some of you, the missioners will have heard his story. And now he is a licensed lay missioner, licensed lay pioneer. So vocational pathways are also important, okay? So that we might start with people being commissioned missioners, but that doesn't mean that's the end of the journey. So what are we proposing? So we're proposing this, okay, to pilot from February 2025 a process of people to be referred either by being those involved in a mission or those involved in a parish who might have a calling to be a commissioned lay missioner engaging with the dechurched and unchurched. So the first thing to say to you, and I'm very open to having a conversation about this at the end of this presentation, who are the people that you know who are very focused at those who are not in the building, right? Do you have people who are really engaged with the dechurched and unchurched and are really passionate, not just about social justice or social action, but those who really hunger for diversity of expression of church that meets the needs of people who are currently dechurched or unchurched, and are willing to travel with them, who feel very comfortable engaging with people who are not churched. Yeah, so it requires I think that's quite a call for those who can be in but not of the parish, right? So there's a sense of that they have a depth of faith, depth of understanding, and are passionate and are somewhat dreamers of what might be. All right, and have the maturity to be able to be part of a parish or a mission and do that well. Right, I certainly have met some missioners who are not easy people, but there's something quite important about the ability to be able to be part of a team in a parish. Right, the idea of commissioned lay missioners is to address things by joining in, not by having people who might be difficult to work with, right? That's what we're working with. So the process will be hopefully starting in February. There'll be a new referral form that is completed by the candidate who's keen to do it. By the way, there will be a leaflet coming out about this at the moment, but it's in draft at the moment, so I can't really share that with you. But there is a referral form that's been agreed. There's also a reference form. So if you're the incumbent or you're the licensed missioner, then you can write a sponsorship, and it's a bit like a reference sort of form just to validate your experience of that person. We'll then have a very informal discernment panel, so the person will literally ask to present something, not too taxing, and enter into conversation where that person then talks about their faith and who they are. And that panel will then make a recommendation to the bishop, and the bishop makes a decision. Okay. And then we're thinking about some sort of formation learning on the job. Yes, this is an apprenticeship model. So there will be 2 parts to an NSML course. There'll be a foundation, which is 8 sessions over a year, whilst they're getting on with doing stuff on the ground, right? So learning through getting on with it. So there's a first year where this is the foundations of mission practice, and the proposal is there's a second year, and at the end of the second year, then they come out with a certificate in mission practice. And we're looking about how we can accredit that as well. So just in summary then, we're talking about an apprenticeship model. We're talking about 2 phases, 2 elements of training. So they're doing it on the job, so they would need monthly supervision, monthly mentoring, and that mentoring will largely, I think, come from me. They will then be attending this learning event, which is all around helping them to engage in context by giving them some tools, theological tools, also some practical theology tools, practical mission tools in how you do this. They'll be expecting to really spend some time listening with you in context, if this is of interest to you. We'll talk later on about what supervision looks like, and then what mentoring looks like. And there's a difference between mentoring and supervision. And then these courses, I think, will attempt to engage with things to do with practical theology. What does it mean to think about the gospel in a particular context? What are the fundamentals of a more Anglican understanding of mission? How do you develop new communities from scratch? And then thinking about leadership development and the big one, reflective practice. Okay. So those are the three levels. Okay. And just to say, what we're looking at is competencies, and we do have a competency framework for missioners now in the diocese. And we are looking at, for this particular level, growth in personal skills, team skills, and missional skills. And just thinking about how we deploy people in terms of expertise and competence, we're looking at commissioned lay missioners having a limited to working ability. Okay, so they need supervised practice, so on that score from basic to expert, we're not expecting these people to be the equivalent of licensed lay missioners. I want to make that really clear. So there's different expectation. For this, we're expecting a limited knowledge and ability. But, there's the possibility, if they have a calling and the bishop's keen and the parishes are keen, that there is a possibility if it grows into it and there's money, then there's potential that it could become a licensed lay missioner, or even later on moving into ordained missioner. But I hope that gives you some idea, that diagram, about the different expectations. Right? We do not expect a commissioned lay missioner to be an expert. So there's something about them gaining in some competence, but where they're not going to know everything around mission, right? So here's some of the official stuff, and I can send this to you. So we are expecting people through the training, through being deployed, if they get to that stage, in growing in these are what I mean by mission skills, collaborative skills, personal skills. So there's lots here around contextual mission. I think that's the real need. Competence in engaging in contextual mission, knowing it takes a long time to set things up. We are asking quite a lot, I think, but that's why the maturity thing is important around particular responsibilities. And again, as I said, all these responsibilities are carried out under the direction of an ordained missioner or incumbent. Okay, and they are expected to have some involvement in pastoral, because it's working with people. They will need some limited pastoral skills, particularly missional skills, because hearing people's story and responding to people's story is incredibly important in the kind of missional journey. But to be really clear that they do not have a leadership role in liturgy. Right. So when it comes, if something is very, very successful and it starts forming into some form of ecclesial community, the collaboration between the commissioned lay missioner with the incumbent or licensed lay missioner is critical about getting that liturgy and everything else right. All right. So in summary about this pilot, all right, please start thinking, and let's have a conversation about it a minute. Do you have people that are already part of your churches or missions who are doing this sort of role or are growing into this or have the potential? If they do, can I encourage you to have a conversation with them about, and you'll get some information. I can send you information about the commissioned lay missioner pilots. And then if you are interested, then please email Jane Wise after the beginning of February for someone to be considered. There will be these two forms to complete. One, a referral form for the application form for the individual to complete. And then if you're going to act as the sponsor, that you will then need to complete some sort of referral form. All that has been completed. And then we'll get on with the discernment, and then the bishop make a decision. And then we really do hope to have a cohort together. And I hope to have a few people that are discerned, that they can actually start together as some sort of learning event. All right. Now, I really hope that then gives a team approach to do some of the work that needs to be done on the ground. And please, I want you really to hear that it cannot be, mixed ecology cannot be more for the already overworked incumbents to do. All right, it is impossible to do that, particularly those who are working part-time. and then those in bigger churches are working full time. All right. So first, before I go on, are there any questions about all of that? Any questions, concern, thoughts? Anything coming up with that?
Ian?
Yes, Eleanor.
Is there in approaching someone in the diocese, in the parish, that would be expected to be like a one-on-one conversation, I guess. Or would you expect, that would be something that would be announced, and if anybody's interested, they would come forward? And would you expect them to read something so they knew what they were applying for ahead of time? Like, how would you see that approach occurring?
I think I would at this, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say, Emily. But I think I would caution that it's like talent spotting. So I think I would prefer that coming from you with people that you've encountered and what you're thinking about particular individuals, because this is a pilot rather than like we want to work out to make sure this is possible, and we really want to learn from that pilot. So I think a talent spotting, that's what the bishop does. She has talent spotted. So I'm wondering if that's something you could do with those that you know and what Stephen knows. So it could be, where you've got deployed deacons or curates or the rest, and they know people, then to have a joined up conversation as a ordained team or the kind of team of a parish. Do you maybe want to talk about, if you have a team in your parish, to talk about that, or there's people that you know, as be my answer. I think it'd be not good to kind of announce something from the front, because this is a pilot. Yeah, that would be my thought. Emily, do you have a view on that?
I think my inclination is sort of similar. That, yeah, I think the types of people who might identify themselves into this role is different than the types of people that might actually be good for the role. So I think the talent spotting is key. Not that somebody could come up to you and say, that they're feeling a certain calling in a kind of way, but yeah, I say it's more about people that you see in your parishes that might have some of these skills and callings.
Will you have a one-pager that can be shared with the person? That's question number 2. And question number 3 is, roughly what time commitment do you think this person would have to devote to a pilot?
So I hope that we will have a leaflet together that you could share with someone, so that we can then get, I'm hoping to get that together soon. I'm sorry that's not quite together yet. In terms of time commitments, that's difficult to say. I mean, they would definitely need to be able to attend a 2-hourly monthly learning event, which we would do as part of the course. And they'd need to be able to attend supervision and attend mentoring. And they would need to have enough capacity to engage in listening, knowing that this work is so relational, that they'd need to have some capacity to commit every week to something with some sort of regular pattern. That would be my answer. And I think the actual hours actually depend on context.
Right. So, if you said something like, you maybe have to find in your week comfortably about 5 hours a week.
Now that might feel, I honestly don't know how to answer that. I don't. So, I mean, lots of commissioned missionaries in London, but that's a different context, were giving the equivalent of a day a week. Some were giving half day a week. So I think it depends. What would you say, Emily? Would you have a view on that?
I don't have a clue. No,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think one thing to that, what you have clarified me though, what you don't want is people already involved in doing loads of things, right? Knowing that some of our churches have got 4 people doing everything, all right? We don't want this to be one of them, all right? It needs to be someone who's slightly, by characteristic, edgy, with a foot in the world and a foot in the church, who would be passionate about doing this, who's not heavily involved in what's already going on. The other thing I'd want to say from my learning from Southwark, so it may be someone who's tested vocation for some other role and has been turned down. So for example, it may be that someone went, because there's only been ordained ministry for quite some time as something you can candidate against. It may be someone who's got turned down from ordained ministry, for example. And I certainly know of one example in this diocese where that might be the case. All right, so they may have tested for other vocations, and given this didn't exist, it didn't lead to anything. But I do think they need to be able, they do need some prep. They do need to be able to understand the Christian faith quite deeply. They need to be able to talk about it, what it means for them, and they need to be quite confident in that relational piece of connection, you know. They don't have to necessarily be extrovert, but they have to feel comfortable engaging with people who are different and engaging conversations, I would say, was quite important.
Are you hoping they will be largely young people in the pilot or mixed age?
Mixed, I think. Garfield, you've been very patient. Garfield next, and then Barman.
When you talk about the outside of church, I do have a couple. I think they have the passion visiting people, working outside of church, getting people in, talking the unchurched, dechurched person. They visit people's home and doing that. Lately, they worship at my church. I find that they are not very good at doing the the church internal thing, liturgy. They're good at talking outsiders. But one thing is this is a bit of challenge is they talk only Mandarin. In our system, how we evaluated them, I think they may be the perfect person working more like Susie Q's job outside of the community. I got at least 5-10 person into the church through the couple, and they still keep doing that. So how can we evaluate it if we want to put them in the position? That's I know we have panel, we have a community to do that. Yeah.
Because, well, I'll be interested to see what Emily has to say, because we have this project in other areas of the diocese. What do we do where English is a second language? I think we can definitely try to flex things, but given that I can't speak Mandarin at all and lots of others, there's got to be some ability to engage in spoken and written English, I would say. But Emily, I'll be guided about you, how you, because you've had this with NSML.
Like in terms of like how
terms
to
of training and how would we,
I'm not sure, like what was the
so I think the issue is what do we do with people who are obviously very talented, and say were Mandarin speakers but had very poor or limited, shall I say, written in and spoken English?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do something, like we'll do something to accommodate. I think that's the only solution. Like if people have those skills, then we should be figuring out how to include them. Might not be a seamless, it might be, there might be some challenges, but I think it's important.
Yeah. So I think, so Garfield, I think this is why we're doing it as a pilot, Garfield. So if you've got people you think are competent and you think need to be considered, then we'll have to work that out one step at a time. Yeah. Barman.
Yeah, with regards to the sponsorship. So, for example, what is the best scenario? It's for example, the rector and forming a group or rector alone. What can be the best way to support the candidate?
Thanks. So in terms of the referral, in terms of the process of discernment, a rector or anybody who's kind of licensed can, I think, officially complete that referral form. But ideally, someone who's a rector or a licensed missionary in terms of the leader of a particular place, I would say. Yeah, and I think when it comes to the learning event, yes, I think we do need to consider that in terms of how we support people on the ground. And I think that will need parishes to support people when they go through this process. So, for example, as with all vocations, what happens if someone goes through all the effort of going through all this, does the panel, and then gets turned down? So I think we don't just, not just in terms of if it's successful working out, but also if people are not. We really need to support people in both of those outcomes. And then what do people need going forward? And I think we hope to learn from these experiences. I think what I'm learning from when I was in Southwark, it would be good. So there's the sense that the incumbent, and I know you're all busy, but gives some time a month for this individual. And it might be that there is a lay other person who could be supportive too, knowing that you're all so busy. Okay. Michael.
First, I want to commend the initiative, and you know, in my context, it would be really helpful to have someone else on board walking alongside with trying to move missional efforts forward. And I have someone in mind that I think might be well suited. He's fairly new to the faith, and that brings up the main bulk of this question is in a small congregation where people know one another. The one concern I have is a congregation that thinks of the ministers as being, you know, professionals, the ones who are set aside and in fact are the ones who are really doing the work of the church, and the rest of the laity are, you know, more receivers of that ministry than doers of those ministries. So how does one kind of incorporate a new recognized position without devaluing the roles that others have been playing for a long time, or putting the newer person at risk by people who've been in the church for a long time being asked, are they good enough for that role?
Good question, Michael. I think there's two parts to that. So if you think about all the stuff that we've done around mixed ecology, we are trying to break down that father knows best and everybody else just consumes religion. So there's something about mixed ecology trying to help people to have I would say, a healthier understanding of participation and different forms of vocation. So I think there's something educative, particularly with churches have got used to a way, the traditional way, is to remind them that we're talking about a team approach. And there's something about looking after those who are looking at being commissioned missioners, to protect them, to have the time to build up relationships with those who are outside of the church. And I think this it's about selling a vision, isn't it? That the involvement of this person is because we're seeking to renew parishes and churches in their connectiveness to neighborhoods. So there's something about parishes getting behind these individuals and giving them room, and not to expect them to be pseudo vicars. I think that's a massive one. They are not ordained. They are not somehow joining in with the ministry of a priest. They are there engaging with, you know, they're there to be like missionaries is the word that we would have said in the past, where they're deployed to engage with those who are dechurched and unchurched and don't belong to a parish or mission. Yeah. And so I think, yeah, so I think there's some teaching, there's re-envisioning and some protection to ensure that goes well. And anything new, I know, is always challenging, and managing change in Anglican parish churches is particularly challenging. So, but I think it's keep selling that vision and wheeling me out. All right, that's the other thing. If you think it's helpful to wheel me out to talk about stuff, so they hear it from an outsider, I'm happy to do that with your existing church, which is kind of what we started on Sunday, Michael. So hopefully that will continue. Yeah. Stephen.
Hey, hey, I was just gonna say, sorry, I lost track of what we were all talking about, but I was going to suggest it's almost like for this role, you're looking for somebody not necessarily from the parish community, but more from the community at large that has those relationship skills and that hunger and thirst for that spirituality, right? So they don't
Well,
have any preconceived,
well,
notions or things like that.
thank you. Good observation. The only thing I would say is I think it's really important they have a mature faith and
Yeah,
they at ease being in an Anglican church and and some of that needs to be proven, I think. So
yeah,
I think it's the ability to belong to part of the church and have a real hunger and passion for those outside of it in a particular neighborhood, right? So it's
yeah,
that both that, and I know it's a difficult ask, but I do think it's possible, right? I'm thinking about people who are naturally that, like Garfield here, and even Dina here, are always considering those outside in the community. So we're seeking that sort of disposition,
yeah.
right? Not someone who's just thinking internally, what's their passion? And hopefully their passion will be people and their passion will be those who don't know Christ.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges that we're going to face, not to like, I'm fully ready for God to be sending commissioned lay missioners out of the woodwork for us. I'm feeling a little bit skeptical, though I'm 100% on board because Ian's my teammate and this is something the diocese is doing. But I'll just tell you where it's those two separate pieces. It's the mature Christian faith and it's the heart for the community. And so one of the challenges I find in our parishes is that actually people with mature faith are sort of few and far between. I don't mean that to be disparaging. I think we have a lot of older people who've been in the church a long time and are churched. They're good churchmen or good church women, good church people, but actually like a living faith that they can bring into the world and into relationships with people is a challenge in general. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is that heart for the community, like almost like what Stephen said. It's almost like we're looking for somebody who's not from the church, who's from outside. You're like, yeah, it's kind of like that, like somebody who has all those deep connections, but they also need to be a person of deep faith. So it's like I think in our context, it is a bit like looking for a unicorn, but I want to have like more faith in that and say that there are people like hidden and that God is bringing out these people. But those are the two things I really hear as being central to this calling. And sometimes those two things together are sort of what's missing. Like if they were abundant in our parishes would be in a super different place, I think, in general, right? So
Thanks, Emily. Very helpful. So when I saw this in Southwark, when we have this discernment panel, I think it's not just going to be a recommended yes, no. It's going to be, okay, so what are the things that need to be addressed to get to the competence? So I imagine that if you've got people like you were just talking about, Michael, and what you're just talking about, Garfield, is that we're going to need, we can definitely focus on developing the missional skills and the relational skills. When it comes to depth of formation of the Christian faith, I'm going to really need you as parish priest to help people go deeper. Yeah. Because some of that has to be done one-to-one and tied into a particular faith community to help people build that based on the tradition of the particular church or mission that they're part of. So I can imagine, this is it. You know what? I'm laughing, Smiley. You're describing what happened to me, right? So I was this radical atheist who then trained to be an occupational therapist, who then had this, I won't go too long about it, but I started out with a real passion for unchurched people with not a very deep faith. And I was required to rightly attend something called Anvil, which was the discipleship formation experience that went on for a year, as well as learning skills. So I think we have to think about that. Yeah, I totally accept, Emily, that there's a big ask. And it might be that we take a risks with calculated risk, prayed for risk with individuals, where if they've got a faith development need, that we work out how that gets addressed as part of the formation.
Yeah, I think that's important for all of us to hear, that like it's like yeah, that it can be that this person is still in formation in either of these aspects. Like, well,
Yes.
we're all still always growing in our faith, right? Like you could say the same thing about me, like that we're all in formation, but I just mean that it's good to know that we can also be looking for people who aren't there yet, but who we see that potential in. And one
Yes.
thing I was talking to Ian about, like what Stephen was suggesting about looking for people outside the church, it might be like a little bit too far. But what I was saying to Ian was, I think we need to look in unlikely places in the church. Like, for instance, like with young adults, that, you know, Sarah Bird here has a group of young adults from across the diocese that meet for conversation, right? Like, would somebody from that group be somebody who could be a commissioned lay missioner or be in that? Or I'm even thinking about like young adults in your own parishes who are very connected to their outside world, like in whatever career they're developing or what they're developing, but maybe aren't as in touch with the parish anymore, but have been formed when they were youth or when they were younger. You know, I just think there's some like ways we can kind of look at different groups than we are the usual suspects.
Totally, Emily. Thank you. That's really helpful. Garfield, before I ask you, Mike and Victor, are you here? Mike, I'd really like to hear what you're thinking about potentially, if you're there, in relation to All Saints. And Victor, I'd be really interested to hear what you're thinking about St. George's, if you're there. I'll give you a couple of minutes to see if they're there. Oh, Victor, I think tried to speak. Hi, Victor. Can you hear us? I can hear you unmuted. Oh, you were and you were not. Okay. So Mike and Victor, if you're getting a position to be able to connect and turn video on, I really great it, because I'd love to hear what you both think about this. You there,
Hi,
Victor?
Ian. Am I coming through okay now?
Yep, I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. No, I'm on a device I've never used before because I'm trying to connect here. Yeah, I came in about 15 minutes after you started. You were just beginning the presentation of videos. So I think I missed the opening part about why we're having commissioned lay missioners. So it sounds like it's requiring a lot of additional training for people to do something that they're passionate about in order to develop a skill set. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so we're thinking about commissioned lay missioners who are starting out with probably very little formation around mission. And we're thinking about how do we then support those who might want to be recognized commissioned missioners to work in a parish, largely a parish context, who then have a mixture of formation and supervision and mentorship to get on developing some sort of missional engagement in a parish to de and unchurched people. That's what we're proposing.
What other roles do the commissioned lay missioners take within the parish? Are they like automatically elevated to a leadership position where they would be speaking to council or to corporation? Like, I'm just curious as to how that changes their function and relationship with other leaders in the parish.
I think it would be about growing into that. It's not going to happen all at once, but there's something about leaning into having someone that you can work with, Victor, and so then drawing them into the kind of a lay leadership team where they are particularly called to work with you, to engage with something contextually, reaching out to the dechurched and unchurched in some way, in the hope that it would then form some new form of ecclesial community eventually, or potentially too. So Yeah, so I think it is a new thing. It is something we're piloting, and something that we are trying to kind of work it out as we go along. So it is a role. It's not, it is a form of leadership, but it's very much about having someone to work with to address thinking about that contextual mission piece. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Thank you. My mind is already spinning about who I could get forward to move forward with that here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good question, Victor. And I think when you're in a big church like Victor's or Andrew's, that when you've already got a mixed ecology of different forms of worshipping communities in one parish church, I think that the danger is to think internally. We are particularly thinking about who's not present to what's already going on, which is much easier to see if you're in a small church or small mission, a little bit harder if you're in a bigger church or mission. Yeah. Mike, are you there?
I am kind of here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Super. I think this is this is a great thing. I very much resonated with Emily's thoughts. I think these people are going to be hard to find. I think that if we can find them in a parish context, that would be really exciting. I think can empower parishes in new ways to connect with the community and build a multi-ecology kind of reality. But I think within a parish context, because of the levels of, let's say, the levels of governance to which people expect to be answerable, I think that could be quite dangerous, quite difficult, unless they are protected in that ministry. I think in missions, if we can find the right people, because we are a lot more flexible and don't have all those layers of noses poking into other people's business, I think that could be a really cool, powerful, dynamic thing that would move us along a lot quicker. At All Saints, we have some wonderfully exciting, growing Christians at All Saints now, but they're far from having the mature faith and knowing how to connect that. So there's no one that comes to mind yet, but there are people, I think, in the future that could be a thing. We need the early faith deepening courses and formation to be in place that will get them there.
No, thanks, Mike. That's absolutely true. So again, thinking about my experiences of doing this in other places, it is true that sometimes these people did not come directly from parishes, but so I can certainly think of, so the guy I just recommended to you, who was a Northern Irish Protestant who moved to London, who started working as running a pub, he got interested in talking to his parish priest and moved from being a dechurched person to getting engaged with an Anglican Church for the first time. And so his formation was slightly different in terms of moving into a new form of church, but his faith, there was definitely a deep faith there. So he moved quite quickly to becoming discerned as a commissioned missioner and then a licensed lay missioner. So it might be like giving his example and what Mike was saying, is it might be someone who comes along who has been dechurched, who really likes what you're doing and you form a good relationship with, that you then start thinking about this. And once they get to the point where you think you know them well enough, and that's not to be rushed, it has to be said, then that might be someone who doesn't come directly from your established parish, for example, parish church community. So there's a discernment piece here, isn't there? I think that's the key thing. It's a discernment thing. And another answer to what we're saying. So when it comes to the training thing, we're deliberately not rushing, right? So it's for an extended period of time, right? So that's why, so if you think about the usual NSM and NSML course, there's 8 sessions over 8 weeks. We're talking about a year. We're talking about the need for supervision, mentoring, and learning, and getting involved in this whole process of listening and building on listening as an ongoing process. So the whole training course happens, if it's fulfilled, over 2 years. See what I mean? So this is not rushing. This is taking things very, very slow and starting to build things up. Yeah, so they gain in skills and knowledge, as well as leaning into a particular parish, leaning into a particular context or mission, and then growing in faith and in skills. And that's hopefully by taking this slow, that we'll be able to do that well. Garfield.
So when you were talking, I keep thinking who might be the ideal candidate. But this is a situation. We have a young man attend our church right now. Is a graduate from the good university. He was brought to Canada 1 year old. He speak English, doesn't speak Mandarin at all. But he will be baptized in our church soon. But I ended up getting to know his father. It's turned out his father is a very smart person, bachelor, master, doctor, and all psychology in the U of T. So he helped to do the 3 or 4 sessions of gather the new people, talk about mental health. We ended up getting 20, 25 new families into the church for the first time. This is happening before the Christmas. So, but the Sunny, his name, we call him Dr. Sunny, and he's on the way of it's discerning the faith and the science. I had a meeting with him last week. I wanted this to keep going. I talked with him. He said, okay, what I can help with church might be a bridge, help people to understand the psychology and bring them to the theology, which that's your territory or church territory. So if this person can be considered the lay commissioned missioner, or I don't know.
Potentially, but the only thing I would say, Garfield, I'm very aware that your mission is very focused on deepening discipleship. Yeah. So I think there's something about not rushing and waiting to see who has these callings and things. And so I don't think there's a black and white thing around this. All right. So I think it's about a mixture of, do they relate to the D and unchurched in a particular context? Are they comfortable talking to people outside of churches? Are they comfortable being part of a church and being so it's that both and that I think is quite challenging, and the discernment thing will need to be particular to that individual. And what I think this conversation is helping me to appreciate, we haven't got a line and they've got to cross it. We're going to have to think about this quite deeply with each person to get this right, because they're all going to have very different learning needs, different faith needs, different personal development needs, so that we need to do this very carefully and slowly. Yeah. So I think Garfield, I think your greatest challenge is that you've got a lot of people who have not got a huge depth of faith. I think that's the big challenge for you. How do we help people to grow in faith and do this? We don't want people. One of the biggest things I learned from the Church Missionary Society from the UK, you might have the most perfect contextual missioner, but if they do not have the resilience of a depth of faith, then this stuff is incredibly difficult to sustain. Yeah. Because dealing with the questions and difficulties of those who have left churches is just as challenging as opening up the faith to people who have not. Yeah, it's not easy. Not easy. But it does exist. I do think I have faith that this can exist, but I totally accept all the potential pitfalls and difficulties and the challenge, when we're already struggling to find vocations for try to find people for the vocations we've already got, let alone trying to find people to doing these kind of new things. But if this is of the Spirit, then we can learn from it. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But and if there isn't anybody there, well, we'll go with that. But I think I want to be open to this. I think prayerfully think that there is a need for it. I certainly know of individuals here who have people that you would like to test vocation for, and therefore, so it might not be huge. We may not be talking about a huge number of people, and that's all right. Yeah, we learn from those that we have. Michael.
Yeah, as you were finishing up with Garfield, it struck me as kind of an apprentice model where some apprentices, they need to be in the classroom for a while before they're ready to get really hands-on. And then there are probably others who, provided they have that mentor, that person that they're working with is fairly directly involved in what they're doing, that get them out there and doing things. And for a small parish like ours, that's kind of what I need, is a right-hand person.
Yes.
when I start a new initiative that can walk with me through that and be evolving. You're shaking your head in affirmation to that. So my other question is, so how does this this working in the world differ from the role of a deacon? So they can be a little sensitive about their position. And
yes. So some deacons, like Stephen here, have a calling to be missional. I don't doubt that for a minute. But and I can't share it with you yet, but you're asking exactly the question that Emily and I and the senior staff talks about before Christmas, about the need to compare the different vocations to make sure that we're not overlapping. So what you need to hear is that that work has almost finished, where there is real clarity about what the different roles are. Right. So this is not about taking over the role of a permanent or transitionary deacon. Right. This is something that's long term, very post Christendom, very much not leaning into pastoral care with people of a particular church, but those who are not members of any church and those who've left churches. Right. So that way it makes it a bit distinctive from most of the work of most of the permanent or transitionary deacons. Stephen, I think, is unusual because he is, well, in many ways, I could say something cheeky, but I'm not going to. But
I knew you were going to say something.
But I think his missional skills and abilities are the reason why the bishops asked him to join in with the missioners in their kind of formation and support. Right, so he's unusual. So you may have a permanent deacon who's got a calling to be involved in this kind of contextual mission. You may not. Right, and but I think the way that the diocese receives, particularly permanent deacons, is a different role from what we're talking about with commissioned lay missioners. Yeah, and that distinctiveness is important. Right? And there's a reason why this is not an ordained role. This is a lay vocation role. Yeah. Ellie.
Hi, sorry, Cathedral Place just called at the moment you said my name. I was in the boat there. During the pilot, is it about being missional, or is there some theology taught as well?
Oh, yes, it's very much theology taught as well. It will be grounding people, hopefully quite concretely, and in understanding Anglican understandings of mission. So there will be, so that foundation element of the course will include what is a fresh expression, what do we mean by Anglican mission, all of that core stuff is taught in the foundations model. So, and actually to have, when I'm talking about missional skills, that missional skills must include some theological understanding, but we are making sure that the learning event has got to be orthopraxis. So it will be talking about these concepts with people working it out in some sort of parish context way, right? So it's not just going to be chalkboard stuff. It will be talked about in the context of doing mission or starting that process of listening, loving, service, building community, all right? But it must be supervised practice. I want you to hear that loud and clear, right? This is not someone who's working at the same level of Garfield or Susie Kim or Mike here. These are people who are starting out that need supervised practice. So your involvement in that is pretty important. Yeah. So it won't be just the diocese putting input into this individual. It will also be you. Yeah. Any other questions? This has been a really helpful conversation, by the way. I'm finding this very helpful for me to think things through. I think it's what it make it, just so you to really share what I'm thinking. It might be if they do the discernment thing of yes, but not yet. It might be that there's a perception that they might need to do some discipleship formation before beginning such a thing, right? So it depends on the individual. So I think what I'm hearing loud and clear is that we have to be super aware of the people's needs and what's going on. to work out next steps. So it might be a yes with lots of other things needing to be addressed, because we are talking about people just starting out. So if they're new to faith, that's something that needs to be considered. They may have all the relational skills and understanding of dechurched and unchurched, but if they haven't worked out faith, then that's something that is pretty critical. Or it might be that someone who's got really good faith, but hasn't done very much and involving with dechurched and unchurched, but really cares about it. So there may be something that needs to happen before they begin. I don't know. See, it's all particular here. So that's why the panel bit of this matters, and the prayerful, and then to do that quite prayerfully and in some detail. This isn't just a yes, no. It's got to be planning, next steps, and recommendations for the bishop to think about. Victor, did you have a question? I see you're unmuted.
No, that would be by accident. I'm trying to figure out. So sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. So as with all these things, I know I've again thrown a lot at you. So if you've got a particular individual or a particular question, and you've suddenly thought afterwards, you know, I've got this idea and I'm thinking about this, please, we can have a conversation about it. All right. So I'm very happy to further the conversation about, and it might be you've got a particular individual in mind, or you've got a particular idea in mind, or it might be that you have a particular mission issue you think needs to be addressed, where you might have someone who's interested in that. So all of that is okay to talk about with me. Okay. And I think if we do this as a pilot, we're all learning. Okay. That's the key thing. I want to, you know, we've got to learn to do this well. What we don't want is to do all this effort. And therefore it doesn't really equip you. But this is all, keep remembering, the motivation here is to recognize that we need teams in parishes and in missions to do this well. All of you are working flat out, just keeping things going often, where there's loads of potential that's bubbling up. So the idea of this post is to support you in realizing some of that potential, knowing that you can only work so much. And I'm aware that as we lean into more of a post-secular society and where we're increasingly post-Christendom, there's a lot that ordained clergy, there's a lot that you guys have to do. So a team approach is there to kind of help that, yeah, to the realism of the challenge of doing mission and church in the 21st century. All right. I don't know how you do what you do, for example, Victor. If I had to do your job, I think I would have I'd have even less hair than I have in my head. Because I'm aware that the demand of even just doing funerals, baptisms, weddings, civic responsibilities, governance, and that, I just think about it, it just exhausts me. So there's an awareness, I think, that ministry now needs to be broad, and we need a team approach. Otherwise, there's going to be things that there's missional opportunities that we'll miss, right? But as I said, and Emily's absolutely right, who knows what's going to happen here, but I prayerfully hope it worked in Southwark, and that, you know, there's the same level of deprivation of discipleship. There's the same sort of crises going on there as here. And they had a cohort. So I taught a cohort of 12 commissioned missioners for 2 years up to where I left. All right. So that was a joy. So that's one of the reasons why we're thinking, okay, so is there something we can lean into here? And the bishop's keen for us to explore this, which is why we're going to do this as a pilot. And let's learn from it. And then what can we put in place learning from that going forward? Okay. Let me stop the recording because I'm sure people don't want to hear the next bit. So just, unless there's anything else, has anybody got any other questions they wanted to ask? Any burning questions, final questions about this? Because I just wanted to check in about what's happening next. No? Okay, so let me just, you hear the American voice.